Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. If you are worried about getting back on a train or a bus to go to work, Jersey Transit wants you to know they are safe and ready to get back to full service. Here's my interview with Kevin Corbett, CEO of Jersey Transit. Hi, sir. As always, thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us today. What has life been for Jersey Transit during the pandemic?
Thanks, Larry, and thanks for having me back. It's always great, and I appreciate your interest in transit. It's hard to believe it's been just a bit over a year. When you think of a year ago, we were worried about obviously our workers, about the traumatic off the cliff ridership. The state was in lockdown. We were scrambling trying to get PPE. We went to daily disinfecting of all our buses and rail cars, and wanted to make sure our employees were safe. There was a lot of confusing data out there about what was, best practices medically, et cetera. So, here we are a year later coming out of it with the vaccinations really starting to take hold. But our ridership, it's been a roller coaster of a year. Ridership, went off the cliff. We were down single digit ridership levels. We're an essential service. So for people, particularly hospital workers, warehouse distribution, grocery store clerks, et cetera, they needed us. So we kept running. We scaled back our service, obviously, significantly in the beginning, partially because we were hit. Our own workers were hit fairly significantly, with positive tests, we tested positive, et cetera. We've had, 21, we've lost 21 of our NJT family, to the pandemic, So that was a real loss. We had frontline workers and even the head of our rail operations. So it was a tough year. And revenues, we get about roughly half of our revenue comes from the fare box. I would say roughly 2.2 billion. 1.1 billion of that is from the fare box. So figure roughly 100 million a month. You drop 90%. You're talking 10 million instead of 100 million. So, financially, it was certainly, really going to show a dramatic financial crisis. And, that gets in it. You can get into a death spiral. If you cut back to cut expenses, then people don't ride you. You don't become reliable. You're not frequent enough. So we were very lucky that the CARES Act was passed in fairly quick order. That gave transit agencies around the country that stopgap measure to get them through the year so they could run service, regular service. Enough to keep the system going, and that did plug a big hole that we had in our budget. One thing that was positive, though, out of it, making sort of lemonade out of lemons, was our capital work. We came out last year, rolled out just as the pandemic was coming. Something I started when I came in 3 years ago. We had no strategic plan here, had no 5-year capital plan, which most major transit agencies would have. So we put that together and we unveiled that early last year, with Governor Murphy, the 10-year strategic plan, as well as our corresponding 5-year capital plan. And it's a $17 billion plan, of which 12 billion has identified funding. So we were able to really move ahead on a lot of our capital work and get those projects. We kept construction going. Some states held back, but most of our work's outside. So as long as it was deemed acceptable from a health perspective, we really moved ahead aggressively on our capital projects, including finishing positive train control, which was a project that was sort of legendary for us. PTC was a safety system that, when came in 3 years ago, was only 12% installed after 11 years. So we were able to get a lot of that work done during the pandemic, so that we were able to be certified in PTC by the end of December last year.
When do you believe you'll be back to full service?
I'm an optimist, but you have to be realistic. I mean, we are budgeting cautiously. We are projecting for next year. Our fiscal year starts in July. So this July, we're figuring over the next year we'll be at 60% ridership level. Right now, we're at 55% on our bus, particularly higher than the 55 on the intrastate. But going into New York, until New York City really opens up, in Philadelphia for South Jersey, till the central business district really pick up and tourism picks back up, we don't see a big surge right away. And then I think looking at the following year, we're thinking 75%, and then after that back to 100. But A lot of what we're hearing is, sort of there's also pent up demand. So, I think that's a conservative projection. We're anticipating, particularly at peak hours. Some people think that people aren't going to go back into the central city. What we're hearing from major employers in New York is that they will be maybe 4 days a week and not five, but and there may be some variations. But we were 110% capacity going in at rush hour in and out of New York. So even if we're at 90% of what it was pre-pandemic, that's still going to be very full volumes. And when you start going to half hour, 45 minutes at the Holland and Lincoln Tunnel and George Washington Bridge, that tends to drive people back to transit a lot. So we see road ridership. Talking to my board chair and DOT Commissioner Diana Scachetti, you see the highway, certainly the turnpike, the traffic, a lot of the road traffic back to pretty much pre-pandemic levels. A lot of that is our riders. So sooner or later we're going to, we're going to be, they're going to have to be, we're going to have such gridlock that people will come back. Some of the riders who aren't currently coming will come back to us.
Are you concerned about a reluctance to come back? You have an enclosed area. It's very difficult to social distance in. I can't believe that you quickly will return to any kind of normalcy, even with inside the track. There's probably masks will be required for a while, and everybody's pushed together. Is there a reluctance because of that, and how do you deal with that?
Good, very good question. I think there is by some people. I mean, I commute into, from Morristown, every day, and I get off into a Broad Street, and take out the light rail or, one of the buses that goes across, whichever I guess get on our app and see what's the next, best way, quickest way to get from Broad Street over to here, Penn Station. But there's some people who, family, friends who are like, oh, they're very nervous about going back. But I see ridership coming back on, on trains that I'm riding. I go in at least once a week to various meetings we have in New York, around New York Penn Station, and you see life coming back. And those who are doing it more and more comfortable, wearing the mask. I see that continuing. Certainly, I think, certainly through the fall. I mean, it becomes longer, but I certainly see it being mandatory at least through September, if not longer. So I think people are coming back. I think people are wearing masks. We see very high acceptance of very little problem of people fighting wearing a mask. And there's a lot of self-policing, even like the quiet car. You don't need a conductor or police person. There'll be plenty of people. Hey, pull up your mask. It's interesting.
Let's talk a little bit about the infrastructure bill. When you heard that, the first time you heard it had to be music to your ears. I know the specifics are still being worked out. We're not sure even what the bill's going to look like at the end, let alone who's going to get what. But at the very least, there sounds like the Gateway project is in there. What are you hoping for from the infrastructure bill? Because there does seem to be some bipartisan support, at least for the roads and trains and bridges part of it.
Yeah, I agree, Larry. And you're right on hitting bipartisan support. I spent my life in transportation, and it was always, there could be social issues that would divide Congress, but the one thing you always saw was it came to transportation. The T&I committee, usually had very strong bipartisan support, and certainly glad to see that. And President Biden's efforts, really, he gets it. He understands it. He rode, Amtrak every day, and they call him Amtrak Joe. And it's not just transportation for transportation's sake. It really is the underpinning of the economy. And certainly the transit agencies around the country, and we're certainly very much one of them, you have these cycles of you get funding for a few years and it dries up. And having dedicated, predictable funding is really important, both for capital and even operating. You can't hire somebody and then say, oh, we're going to fire you next year. We don't have funding, that uncertainty. So having a base level of funding, both for operating and capital, that recognition coming out of the president is really exciting, and bipartisan support helping to get those core things for transit and transportation. Yeah, those are that's music to my ears. And I would say Portal Bridge. You mentioned Gateway specifically. For us, we were able to get through the Trump administration. We were closed by the end of last year the full funding grant agreement for Portal Bridge, which is a precursor, the 110-year-old swing bridge that was always causing all the commuters nightmares. We have the money, it's fully in place. We are building, we have it out to bid right now, and we expect to award the contract by the end of this year. So that's a really good building block for the tunnel, which we are working now with the Gateway Development Commission, setting that up, working very positively and in an aggressive fashion from the current leadership under Secretary Buttigieg to get that project up and running for the tunnel and the expansion of New York Penn Station, really laying the groundwork for the next 100 years. I think New York metropolitan area is going to remain the center of global commerce for a long time. So these are long lead projects. We need that dedicated funding to really make these, century-long investments.
You talked about the money that was lost during the pandemic, but then you mentioned the CARES Act, and thanks God for the CARES Act. Are you whole right now?
We are whole right now, and our budget for the coming year, starting between CARES and then the CARISA funding, plus what the governor put in his budget from state support, we will be whole without any fare increases for next year.
That's wonderful. How about a fare increase? Is that going to happen anytime soon?
Not next year. New Jersey actually pays a high percentage of fare box recovery, what they call fare box recovery, how much you get from fares out of your total revenue. And particularly, you look at a lot of the people who are sort of lower into the socioeconomic spectrum, as they're coming back and as the unemployment comes down. It's really not, in my view, and the governor's view, that this coming year is not the time you need to hit them with a fare increase.
And we mentioned the infrastructure bill, but that hasn't stopped you from construction. I understand that you just broke ground, or at least announced the Lyndhurst project down up in Lyndhurst. So, want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, certainly. I'd say Lyndhurst is one, but I think, and I hear it even from the engineers when I ride in the front of the train with them, as they're going around. If you go down our coastline, you see Raritan River Bridge. That's a $600 million replacement bridge, or the precursor of the Portal Bridge. Hoboken, your train comes into Hoboken, on the south side, there's an old canal that was there that used to flood over the tracks anytime, not just with a major hurricane, even time there's, a nor'easter came through. So we've filled that in. There's a big project going on there, doing rehab of the whole Hoboken yard. So a whole number of stations, Newark Penn Station, the governor, announced $160 million. We're going to do a major overhaul of Newark Penn Station. Newark is really coming back. So that's a keystone for, a gateway for people coming to Newark. We have the Walter Rand Transportation Center down in Camden. That's a $250 million project, and a number of stations throughout that we have programmed for renovation or complete, new stations. So very exciting time. A young engineer, somebody in the architects, in the construction field, to be working here. We are really extremely busy, getting these capital projects out the door. It's a good time. The market is very good now to be bidding projects.
Let's end with this. You have a lot of New Jersey Transit riders out there that are wondering what things are going to be like. Should I take Jersey Transit if I have to go back to work? Should I drive because it may not be safe? I know we've talked about it already, but just talk directly to them, calm their fears.
Sure. I would say, if you look as a regular rider myself, I see it. The people who are riding are comfortable. They're wearing their mask, and we are taking the top of the line efforts for sanitizing, cleaning, all our vehicles and stations. We've also put in technology for the handheld devices for the conductors. And if you're taking a bus, you can use that tap and go technology rather than where it was paper handling or money handling. So that's available. So there's a lot less contact now. So I think if you're coming back to transit and you haven't been on us, in a year or so, you're going to find that it's a very different transit system. We have new buses have been arriving. We have several hundred new buses that we've taken delivery of last year and continue to take delivery. So I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised. We even have, just joking this morning, we had a press conference on we're offering free rides for those people to get vaccinated, together with an effort we did with several private sector partners. And Governor Murphy yesterday also mentioned you can get a free beer if you get vaccinated. Some of the breweries are offering. So now you can get vaccinated. We'll even give you a beer. We'll give you a free ride. Everything but a foot massage. So if you come back to transit, I think it's going to be clean and it's safe. And use particularly if you have a cell phone. Use the app. It has a whole wealth of information that shows how full is my ride. If you're not comfortable with, say, on a full bus, you'll see sort of a green, yellow red, under the bus number, and when it's arriving, they'll show you. And our trains, there's little boxes on the app underneath your train. You can see each one represents a car. It is green, yellow, or red, each box. So that tells you the car is, empty, half full, or, red, meaning obviously that it's a full car. So people can judge, oh, I don't want to get in the crowded car, but I can see the fifth car back is, yellow or green. And, so there's a lot of technology that we've been installing in the last few years, and particularly have started to pay dividends as those investments made 2 years ago, starting to pay dividends now. So I think people will see that. We even have a program, as I said, NJT Rewards, that gives you, if you buy your ticket, also you can get rewards that are redeemable at local restaurants or museums, where we have a partnering program, like the Intrepid Museum in New York, et cetera. And restaurants say, for me in Morristown, if I'm going to Morristown, I get off. The local restaurants say they get a discount, and it helps support local businesses, but also gives our riders something back. So I think they're going to find it a much more pleasant experience than it was a year or 2 years ago.
Well, thanks. I look forward to getting back on Jersey Transit myself. I really appreciate your time. Kevin Corbett, CEO of Jersey Transit. Still to come on Jersey Matters, his restaurants were shut down by the COVID police, and he thinks he was targeted on purpose. He'll explain next.